I've found something that defies the balance of the game itself through and through. It trivializes all aspects of Destiny, from general gameplay, to endgame nightfalls, to raiding, to solo flawless dungeons, by quite literally making you invincible. There's a possibility you've seen this build already, but I guarantee you haven't seen it like this. Anyone who calls this build shallow or simple just has no clue how deep and complex it can truly get. So I'm here to show you what this setup is actually capable of when mastered, and how to master it. Today I present to you the Warden of Sol, a comprehensive Solar Titan playbook composed of 3 different specializations and playstyles equipped to handle any situation in the Destiny universe. And right now I'm going to show you exactly how to play it to perfection. I'll first teach you everything you need to know about the abilities of the Solar Titan subclass, along with the ideal aspects and fragments you'll want to run. After that, we will discuss everything you need to know about the 3 different exotic armor pieces viable for this build. Next, we can talk about all of the armor mods and stats to complement and enhance our loadout. Which, by the way, this guide is built to stand the test of time, so I will not be discussing any seasonal mods in this video. After that, we will look at the 3 specializations available in this build, as well as the playstyles and capabilities enabled by each spec, where you fit into your team composition, and how to use your invincibility to be a truly formidable fortress. And at the end, we will wrap up with some special top secret fashion options so you can look the part as well. With this video, I will make you a Destiny legend, win your subscription, and change the way you play the game forever. So allow me to show you a new way to experience Destiny. Chapter 1 is all about the tools in your toolkit. These are the basics, yes, but understanding them inside and out is the key to using them with maximum effectiveness. There is no better place to start than with our bread and butter ability that has some secret tricks you might not know about up its handle. The Throwing Hammer is a projectile melee ability that will live in the environment after use and can be picked up on contact within 10 seconds of throwing it before it explodes. If picked up, it fully recharges your melee ability, allowing you to throw it again. If you pick it up after hitting an enemy target, it also grants Cure, a 60 HP heal equivalent to about 1/3 of your total health. This ability works best at close range, for easy and instant pickups, allowing for immediate reuse. As such, it can cause a lot of unintentional regular melee activations when your charged melee ability is up, due to being in close proximity to an enemy. The solution to this is to go into your keybinds and set both your charged melee and your uncharged melee to the same key. And yes, you can 100% do this on controller as well, by going into the button layout and selecting custom. By doing so, your charged melee will always be used if available, otherwise your uncharged melee will be used instead. Auto Melee says that it does this, but from my testing, it appeared to use the uncharged melee when close enough to an enemy, even when my charged melee ability was up. Whether it's a bug or not, I am not sure. Regardless, the aforementioned method works flawlessly. Where the Throwing Hammer really gets interesting is if you have teammates that are also using it. Should you ever lose your hammer, or your teammate theirs, you can hug each other as the generous donor throws theirs on the ground in between the two of you. If positioned properly, both will receive the restoration of their melee ability from a single hammer. If used to its extreme, you can create a sort of multi-manned artillery battery where you can effectively be fed hammers by a teammate to continuously hit a target at range. What truly unlocks the vast capabilities of our Throwing Hammer, however, is our aspects and fragments. Sol Invictus, granting 2 fragment slots, creates sunspots from solar ability final blows and from the death of scorched targets, both at the location of the dead enemy for 6 seconds. It's worth noting, however, that this timer can be paused by having any Titan using the Sol Invictus aspect stand inside of the sunspot. If the Sol Invictus Titan walks out of the sunspot, the original 6-second timer will continue counting down from where it left off until either a Sol Invictus Titan stands back inside of the sunspot to pause the timer again, or until that hidden timer hits 0, at which time the sunspot will despawn. Sunspots also have a lifespan hard cap of 20 seconds. Sol Invictus also creates sunspots from the Hammer of Sol cast and Hammer of Sol impacts. Sunspots apply scorch and damage to enemies inside of them. Remember that scorch Scorch is a stacking damage over time debuff that triggers Ignite, a solar explosion at 100 stacks. When you stand inside of a sunspot, it grants Soul Invictus, a 5-second buff that grants 100% faster base grenade and melee regeneration, not to be confused with Soul Invictus the Aspect. This buff will constantly refresh while standing in a sunspot, unlike Solar Restoration, which is granted for 5 seconds only upon entering a sunspot. It can only be refreshed by exiting and re-entering the sunspot. Your super also drains more slowly while standing in a sunspot. Our other aspect, Roaring Flames, grants another 2 fragment slots and a stacking buff for every final blow with a solar ability or ignition that increases the damage of our solar abilities, stacking up to 3 times and lasting for 19 seconds. This is a 20% increase at 1 stack, 44% at 2, and 73% at 3. While Roaring Flames is active, our uncharged melee attacks also deal solar damage and scorch targets, meaning that while having at least 1 stack of Roaring Flames, you can get kills with your uncharged melee to continue stacking Roaring Flames or to refresh the buff if you do not have your throwing hammer available. These 2 aspects, as well as the throwing hammer, are further empowered by our fragments. We have a total of 7 viable fragments to select from based on our build, playstyle, and situation for our 4 available slots. We will talk about which fragments are recommended for which builds and specializations in the next chapter, but we can talk about what each of the fragment options does right now. The first of these is Ember of Torches, which causes charged melee ability hits against combatants to make yourself and nearby allies within 8 meters of you radiant for 10 seconds. Remember that Radiant provides a 25% damage buff to all weapon damage. After that is Ember of Solace, which increases the duration of radiant effects applied to you for 5 seconds and restoration effects applied to you by 50%. Specifically, it brings our Sunspot Solar Restoration from 5 seconds to 8 seconds, and our Ember of Torches Radiant buff from 10 seconds to 15 seconds. Moving on is Ember of Char, causing your solar ignitions to spread 40 scorch stacks to affected targets. After that is Ember of Ashes, which causes all of your scorching effects to apply 50% more stacks. Next, we have Ember of Eruption, which causes your solar ignitions to have increased area of effect. It's worth noting as well that each of the 3 previously mentioned fragments in Char, Ashes, and Eruption all synergize incredibly well with weapons that have the Incandescent perk, which spreads Scorch to nearby enemies when defeating a target with that weapon. If you want to see what weapons can roll with Incandescent, you can find them all, as well as all of their other possible perks and stats, using the link in the description. With that being said, we can move on to our next fragment in Ember of Singeing, which grants 300% increased class ability regeneration for 3 seconds after applying Scorch to an enemy. And finally, we have Ember of Benevolence, which grants us 200% additional base ability regeneration for 6 seconds when applying Cure, Radiant, Restoration, or any form of healing to allies. Moving on to grenades, the 4 options to consider are the Healing Grenade for bonus survivability thanks to its Cure and Restoration, Solar and Thermite Grenades for territory control thanks to their large AoE, and Fusion Grenades for single target damage thanks to their potent burst capabilities. Finally, for our super, we want to go with Hammer of Soul, which is effectively an on-demand sunspot generator should you ever get in a sticky situation where you can't get a solar ability kill to generate a sunspot. Before we move on to Chapter 2, where we will talk about the 3 exotic armor pieces that bring this build to a new level, do me a favor and hit those like and subscribe buttons if you've learned something new in this section, or even if you're just enjoying the video. With that taken care of, let's talk about our exotics. Versatility is key in a game like Destiny that hosts a myriad of different activities and combat situations. Sometimes you want to go full offense for things like raids and dungeons, solo killing 7 million HP bosses in seconds. Other times you might want to spec into defensive play for things like Grandmaster Nightfalls, healing so much that you can tab out to use your free Amazon Prime sub to subscribe to me on Twitch without taking a scratch. You might even like a more support-oriented playstyle as well, to be that sun shining down on your allies, buffing up your teammates to be just as invincible as you are. Whatever you fancy, this build has 3 complementary exotics that each promote a specific brand of playstyle. However, mastering all 3 of them and knowing when to use which is the key to becoming a Warden of Soul. We'll touch on when to use which later in the video though. For now, let's start with our offensive option that takes us from Guardian to Godkiller. Syntheseps grants us a 200% melee damage buff via Biotic Enhancements, which procs anytime you are near 3 or more enemies and lasts for 8 seconds. This buff applies to charged melee abilities such as the throwing hammer as well. Add 3 stacks of roaring flames into the mix and your throwing hammer is hitting for some ridiculously high damage. With Syntheseps, you'll want to rock Healing Grenade and Towering Barricade for safety contingencies, since you certainly don't need any additional damage tools. For fragments, you'll want to use any combination of Torches, Solace, Ashes, Char, and Eruption. Moving on to our defensive option that transforms us into an unkillable phoenix, Loreley Splendor creates a sunspot at our location with improved restoration effects anytime we cast our class ability or become critically wounded, aka when our health bar turns red. This pairs incredibly well with Rally Barricade as it has a 16-second cooldown versus the 20-second cooldown of Towering Barricade at tier 10 resilience, allowing for even more Loreley sunspot uptime. With how often Loreley Splendor is available in proccing, Healing Grenade is a bit overkill, so a damage grenade like Fusion, Thermite, or Solar is much more suitable here. Your must-have fragment for this exotic is Ember of Singeing, for faster class ability regeneration when scorching targets from your sunspots, and for even more Loreley uptime and even more healing. For your other 3 fragments, you can run any combination of Torches, Solace, Char, Ashes, and Eruption. Finally, we have our support option that allows us to buff our teammates just as much as we can buff ourselves. Phoenix Cradle allows sunspots to grant Soul Invictus and Solar Restoration to allies who pass through our sunspots, and doubles the duration of Soul Invictus from 5 seconds to 10 seconds. The additional ability regeneration and sunspot access to our allies offered by this build allows us to offer a lot more utility to our teammates in the form of ability regeneration, Solar Restoration, Titan Barricades, and supportive or offensive grenades. This exotic option is best coupled with either Barricade and any of the 4 grenades depending on the activity. For fragments, we want Ember of Benevolence for increased ability regen whenever an ally walks through our sunspots, and Ember of Torches to give Radiant to our allies on charged melee hits for more Benevolence procs. For the other 2 fragment slots, you can run any combination of Solace, Ashes, Char, and Eruption. As far as which fragments are good and what circumstances for those slots where I recommend any combination of multiple fragments, you can effectively look for what you don't need in a given situation and go from there. For example, if you plan to do absolutely 0 damage with weapons with the Syntheseps build, you could omit Torches. Or if you feel that you don't need extended buff timers, you can drop Solace. The effects that these 2 fragments bring to the table are the strongest of the lot though, so you should default to them in any situation where you can benefit from their effects. However, there might be a situation where their effects will not be useful, in which case defaulting to Ashes, Char, and Eruption will work much better. Now that you understand everything being granted by our armor, let's talk about all of the mods that we are utilizing to have infinite abilities and the stat build we want to opt into to make us truly invincible. Mods and stats are incredibly important to these builds and playstyles, but build crafting can be a bit meticulous, so I've taken the liberty of making your life a little bit easier. In the description of the video, you can find a Destiny item manager link for each of the specializations that we will talk about in the next chapter that will automatically create a loadout containing their abilities, aspects, fragments, and mods, assuming that you own all of them. No need to say thanks either, you can just tap the like and subscribe buttons while you're down there instead. Nonetheless, having them equipped is only 10% of the equation. Understanding what they do and how to utilize them is what will truly make us invincible. Like I said in the intro, I will not be discussing any seasonal mods in this section. I encourage you to utilize them where you can, but by no means is any seasonal mod required for this build. Our mod setup is centered around Elemental Wells. Elemental Wells are miniature elemental orbs that recharge your regular abilities instead of your super. They last on the ground for 20 seconds, and when picked up refund 10% of your lowest charged ability, or 10% of all abilities if the element of the well matches that of your currently equipped subclass. With all that said, let's get started with Melee Well Maker, a 4 energy neutral mod that creates an elemental well matching our subclass type anytime we get a charged melee kill, aka every time our throwing hammer finds its target. Since these builds are all about Solar Titan, these will always be solar elemental wells. After that is Seeking Wells, a 2 arc energy mod that will draw the elemental wells that we create to us. This works great to allow you to focus strictly on finding your throwing hammer in the heat of battle, without having to worry about picking up your wells, allowing you to better focus your attention on the fight. Up next is Well of Life, a 2 solar energy mod that grants healing for 11 seconds when picking up a solar elemental well. This healing buff is separate from that of Solar Restoration, so you can double dip into into the pair for an incredible amount of healing. Moving on, we have Bountiful Wells, a 2 solar energy mod that causes spawned elemental wells to stack, spawning an additional well for every copy of an elemental well generation mod that we have, including an additional well from Bountiful Wells itself. This means that with Melee Wellmaker and Bountiful Wells, we will create 2 solar elemental wells for every charged melee ability kill, and once we throw on a second copy of Melee Wellmaker, we will create 3 from every charged melee ability kill, which is equivalent to a 30% refund to all of our abilities. Last but not least, we have 1-2 Finisher, a 1 arc energy class item mod that refunds our melee charge on finishers in exchange for 1/6 of our super. This is perfect for those situations where you lose track of your hammer or accidentally throw it off the map. I know this would never happen to you as you are perfect, but for the rest of us, it's a nice failsafe plan. And don't worry, finishing a target while you have a fully charged melee ability will not take your super energy from you even while using this mod. Now that we know what all of our mods do, let's talk about what stat lineup we want to aim for to add to our already existing invincibility. The number one thing you need to shoot for before absolutely anything else is 100 resilience. Not only is this giving you 40% damage resistance, but it also grants you an extra 15 HP, brings your Towering Barricade to a 20-second cooldown, and your Rally Barricade to a 16-second cooldown. After that, it's all about discipline for 2 reasons. The first is that no other stat matters all that much. Titans don't care about mobility, and this build has them healing too much to care about recovery. Intellect doesn't mean much as your super is primarily used to restore your melee ability from 1-2 Finisher, or as a panic button if all else fails. And Strength is meaningless due to the 2 already existing easy ways to instantly restore our melee ability. The second is that the Solar Grenade suite is incredibly strong. Healing grenades are nice for situations where you might have a tougher time making sunspots like Grandmaster Nightfalls. Solar and Thermite grenades are great for zone control and spawn killing, and fusion grenades are great for bursting down tankier targets. I suppose recovery could find use in some situations where killing enemies and making sunspots and elemental wells could be more difficult, like Grandmaster Nightfalls, but in that circumstance you would be better off with more healing grenades anyway. Congratulations on making it this far. You now have every piece of knowledge there is to know about all of the tools in your toolkit. However, to become truly invincible, you have to understand exactly how to use them. So let's talk about the 3 different specializations for you to master on your journey to becoming a Warden of Soul. The Warden of Soul has 3 different specializations, otherwise known as specs, that I recommend you familiarize yourself with, opting into whichever one would best suit you and your fire team's needs in real time. The first is the Deicide, an offensive syntheseps-based playstyle focused on one-shotting absolutely everything in sight. Your objective with this spec is to keep 3 Roaring Flame stacks at all times, while simultaneously putting yourself at the center of enemies to gain the Biotic Enhancements buff from syntheseps. Doing so allows you to do damage that can easily exceed that of a full fire team. The keys to succeeding with this spec are making sure that you kill a red bar enemy as your Roaring Flames timer gets low, refreshing it and maintaining your stacks. Additionally, being in the middle of everything will have you taking a lot of damage, so being able to quickly retrieve your hammer for cure, killing red bar enemies for sunspot provided solar restoration, and making proper use of your healing grenade are important skills to have. Mastery of this playstyle comes not from mechanical skill, but from disciplined cooldown usage, buff timer management, and environmental awareness. The next spec is the Phoenix, a survivability Loreley Splendor based playstyle focused on stalwart defense and a truly unkillable guardian. Your objectives with this spec are to strictly survive. Your consistent creation of sunspots will keep your solar restoration running, and Loreley Splendor's class ability Sunspot proc on a broken health bar will ensure safety even in the most dangerous of situations. Whenever your class ability is lost from the Loreley proc, your goal is to immediately regenerate your class ability. This is best done by utilizing the Ember of Sinjin's 300% bonus class ability regeneration when scorching enemies, which can be done easily with sunspots or even a solar weapon with incandescent. Additionally, if you have the Roaring Flames buff active, uncharged melee attacks will also apply scorch to enemies, thus proccing Ember of Sinjin. Due to your immense healing and durability, you can play the front lines of the fight to absorb aggro from the bulk of enemies, allowing your teammates to safely take their shots. Mastery of this spec requires you to truly embody a phoenix, being reborn from the ashes of your broken health bar as it takes the form of a solar restoration applying sunspot, and using your renewed strength to have an invincible presence on the battlefield as you reacquire your abilities. Our final spec is the Purifier, a support Phoenix Cradle based playstyle focused on keeping your teammates as invincible as yourself. Your objective with this spec is to create as many sunspots as you can. As such, Focusing on the weaker red bar enemies can be a viable strategy, creating a sea of sunspots for your allies to buff themselves with as you focus larger, more threatening targets. You can also stand in sunspots to extend their duration, further guaranteeing that your allies will always have a sunspot to refresh their buffs in. Mastery of this spec requires you to look after your teammates as much as you are looking after yourself, by making sure there is a sunspot available somewhere on the field for them at all times. These 3 specializations cover almost all aspects of Destiny gameplay. What's left is for you to understand when to use each one and how to best modify it for you and your fire team's specific needs. It will take time and practice for you to work your way up through the various echelons of Solar Titan mastery, but once you finally arrive at the pinnacle, you have one final step. Becoming a Warden of Soul is an achievement to be celebrated, but absolutely pointless if you don't look the part. So here are some certified S-tier fashion setups that are sure to get you some flirty gazes and complimentary messages as you venture through your Destiny career. You have my full permission and appreciation to copy and or modify these looks to your heart's content. Just make sure to give me a high five in the tower should we ever cross paths. I also firmly believe that a key part of any Warden of Soul is a name for their trusty throwing hammer. It should be intimidating, fierce, and most of all, grand. I named mine Harold, and you should let me know what you are going to name yours in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. I would sincerely appreciate it if you would consider subscribing and leaving a like on the video if you did. If you have any additional questions about these builds, Solar Titan, or Destiny as a whole, you can drop them in the comments below, in my Discord server linked in the description, or come to my live stream and ask me there. I would absolutely love to meet any and all of you over in the live Twitch chat. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.